When Governor Charlie Baker took office last week, he acknowledged a host of serious challenges facing Massachusetts, among them homelessness.
They range from having more than 1,500 homeless families assigned to hotels and motels.
In fact, the rate of homelessness has risen faster here in Massachusetts than in any other state. That's why it's the first topic in our week-long focus series on how Governor Baker is charting the next course for Massachusetts. WGBH News reporter Craig Lamalt has the details of Baker's plan.
A vote on the dotted line, so get another paper.
For Shantae Cornett and her daughter Kalia, home is this temporary apartment in Mattapan. They're trying to make an origami pig, and it's not going so well.
Ooh, we did something wrong.
Cornett used to live in Springfield with Kalia's father, but she says it was an abusive relationship.
The kind of abuse that I basically dealt with was verbal, emotional. It was physical abuse.
Fearing for her safety, Cornett left with her daughter for Boston. For years, they bounced from one state-funded temporary home to another.
Homeless does not necessarily mean the person that's out there on the street that you see asking for change underneath a blanket, like right in the Boston Commons.
Cornett is part of what some advocates call a growing homeless crisis. Robin Frost says the situation is the worst she's ever seen.
There's no question about it. As the economy is chugging back into line, we still have lots of families and individuals who are living in poverty, who are affected by the housing instability. And so tonight, at least on the family side, we have over 4,500 families that are in emergency shelter.
On the campaign trail, Charlie Baker said the state needed to do more for homeless families and touted a plan to do that. In the short term, he wants to stop using hotels as temporary shelters, help more families stay with relatives, and devote more funding to local service agencies. Longer term, Baker wants faster intervention with at-risk families, to increase affordable housing options, and to create regional networks of service agencies. None of that is really new, says Frost, but she says that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I believe that there are points within that plan that we would like to see grow and get better. So I'm hopeful.
But Frost says one thing is missing from Baker's plan: the word poverty.
And so unless we're really looking and drilling down on how we can really address people's poverty, then that also is a missing cue, and that's been missing quite a bit in all the administrations.
Philip Mangano was the homelessness czar under President George W. Bush. He's known Baker for years and says the governor has a strong track record.
One element of that track record was that there were hundreds of homeless families in welfare hotels when he was the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He committed his administration, that is, his secretariat, to not only diminishing that number, but to bringing it to zero, and he did that.
Mangano says Baker is making the best use of limited resources.
When you concentrate the resources through business principles and practices on what seems intractable, homelessness, and create change there, you create a psychological tipping point and a policy tipping point that if we can do it for them, we can get it done for everybody.
Mangano says Baker's plan will lead to more outcomes like Shantae Cornett's. She's now in a mentoring program at the Crittenden Women's Union. And by the end of the month, she and her daughter should be moving into permanent housing.
I'm excited, really. I feel as though, like, now I'll have my whole life back.
And Cornett has just finished up her first semester at Bunker Hill Community College, Adam, and she's studying human services.
So Shantae Cornett is a Deval Patrick administration success story. How is Governor Baker's approach going to be different than Governor Patrick's?
Well, what I've been hearing from advocates that I spoke with is that the state has really stopped funding some of the things that have really been working. On individual homelessness, it's things like housing for people with mental illness and people getting out of jail and foster care, having homes for them. And then also on family homelessness, things like workforce development and child care. And what I hear is that Baker is really a data guy. He wants to see the research, and that's going to help him determine what things he wants to spend more money on and what things maybe need to be cut back.
All right, Craig Lamalt, thank you.
You're welcome.
So are Baker's plans to get homeless families back on their feet enough? Here to take a deeper look at that issue are Libby Hayes, Executive Director of the nonprofit group Homes for Families. She also sits on the State Advisory Board on Housing and Homelessness. And Donna Haig-Friedman joins us as well. She's a poverty policy researcher at UMass Boston. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So can we just start by talking about why there has been this sharp spike in homelessness in Massachusetts? What's behind it?
What we've really seen is a drastic increase in the amount of rent and wages that haven't kept up. So when we look at the data of fair market rents and where that is, and the stagnated wages, it's leaving a lot of families behind, both families that are working, families that are not working.
Don, is that your take as well?
Income inequality has real consequences for real people, and this is the way it expresses itself here in Massachusetts. We have one of the highest income inequality circumstances in the country.
So is that something that any governor, whoever it is, whatever their sort of ideological tendencies are, is that something that a governor can manage?
We have to look at how to close that gap, be it by working to get help families increase their incomes, or to have rental subsidies to decrease the amount that families have to pay towards rent. So there's a lot of things that the governor has control of: housing subsidies, workforce programs, getting different communities involved to be able to change that dynamic.
Donna, do you like, sorry to interrupt you, do you like what you're hearing from Governor Baker in terms of his plan for tackling homelessness?
Honestly, there's something very important that I see missing, and it's been missing from across many administrations.
Okay, so
and
not
it's
in Governor
complex.
Patrick's approach either. What is that?
That is that there is a pipeline of families who are in a hardship situation where there is a working adult and children, but the wages of those families are too low to get by on. And there is no effective, right now, there is no effective packaging or blending of wages, low wages, with public income supports that actually are needed. Child care assistance, housing assistance. For example, when families have an opportunity, a wage earner, to have a wage increase, often, and accept a promotion, it's better to not accept that promotion, because there will be a loss of resources that actually the family needs to continue to make ends meet.
Can you explain to me what the cutoffs would be for the sort of things you're talking about? Like, what's an example of someone moving from an annual salary of X to Y who would lose an important service?
So, for example, the income eligibility for shelter is at 115% of the federal poverty level. So often there's a family that's working, can't afford the cost of rent, but is not making too much to be able to get into shelter. Then as families move up along the continuum, you see a family that may be making a decent wage, but as they increase their income, they may lose health care benefits, food stamp benefits, and actually have their net income go down.
And here's another wrinkle to this. Many families who are in a hardship situation, whose wages are not high enough to actually live on with kids, for just at a basic level, are not eligible for certain kind of resources like the Earned Income Tax Credit. 43% of families who have a working adult with kids are in a hardship situation are not eligible for that resource.
So the Earned Income Tax Credit, that's a federal issue largely, right?
And state.
And state,
both.
Okay. How about that 115% shelter requirement that we were talking about? Is that a federal or a state benchmark?
It's a state benchmark.
State benchmark, okay. So would your advice to Charlie Baker be to bump that up a little bit, say to 150%, 130%?
Honestly, I don't think a piecemeal response is going to work. What is needed is a coordinated, across the state agencies, unified eligibility approach that is going to require, that will be hard, that works well with parents' wages.
Can you explain to me, and pardon me for being slow on the uptake, but what would that mean in concrete terms, briefly? What would the final result be?
So it might mean a unified eligibility application.
But I don't even unified eligibility, so you want a bunch of services, income assistance, food stamps,
housing assistance, child care,
and you would fill out one application, and that would get you access to whatever you need.
But the state agencies, that each of them who focus on one of those areas, would have to work together to have that be a very coherent system.
Libby, do you agree with Donna that that would be helpful? And
I do. I think the key really is getting families the right resource they need for their individual needs and their individual strengths and opportunities, which varies across the state. So looking at arbitrary numbers doesn't always get families what they need. We need to do individualized pathways to help people sustain their families and keep their families safe and on a pathway to increase their income.
Very briefly, the state doesn't have a lot of money right now. We've got this big budget shortfall, which apparently is approaching $1 billion. Is there enough money to do the sort of things you think needs to be done, things you think need to be done?
So for every dollar put into the prevention side, the state saves $8 to $10 that is now going into emergency shelter. it's a much better use of resources to really focus on the permanent solutions, so that more families with children in this Commonwealth have a sense of stability around their housing.
All right. Donna, Libby, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.